saw from the participant list yesterday that I know many of you and have had a chance to interact even this spring, and I look forward to seeing many of you throughout the year. So I'm Katrina Rogers, President of Fielding, and have that honor and pleasure. And also with me today is June Klein and Akasha Saunders. And June and Akasha are part of the Inclusion Council, so you two can wave. So thank you both for being part of not just the Inclusion Council, but our larger collaborative, which we're calling Building Inclusive Communities, or otherwise known as BIC, because it's Fielding. So we always say things like HOD and ELC and BIC and so on. So that's our alphabet soup. They've become a member of that. And there may be a third person coming on the panel if his schedule allows, and that's Tom Hayashi. And Tom and June and another colleague, Karen Williams, actually wrote this PowerPoint. So part of what I'm doing today is, and not just today, but throughout the last several months, has been to present these ideas to the community and get input and early engagement about some of our thoughts and ideas around how to truly integrate the values that we hold. I just got muted by the host, Hillary, so I've unmuted myself. Hopefully that will work. Can you hear me, Hillary?
Yes, I can. You're all good. Thank you.
Okay. And I think it's really important that we get sort of a broad-based understanding of where Fielding is heading as a community, especially around our values that we hold. How do we integrate them across programs? How do we deepen our understanding and intellectual engagement and learning and these important ideas and these ways of being in the world? So I just want to acknowledge Karen and June and Tom, and I think I just saw a chat that Karen may be also on the call as a participant. So great to see you, Ruth, and I can see there are many other people coming in. So it's always good to be here. I'm always excited about seeing alumni. So Hillary, if you could go to the slides. So what I'm really going to talk about here is the team has been working on three, right now, really three understandings of how we could build a case. So what they're calling the explicit rationale, but how do we build a case for diversity and inclusion in our context? So as and those three areas are our academic excellence piece, the institutional vision piece, so institutional vision, and then the case for social justice. And so they started, I think, from a very important and appropriate frame, which is, who are we? What is it we're aspiring to be in the world? Well, we were founded almost 45 years ago now, based on this idea that we could offer a flexible learning model for mid-career professionals and really start to build a body of scholars who are also practitioners. So this scholar-practitioner model is really at the basis and forms the basis of our understanding of pedagogy, which we created a more encompassing term called andragogy. So right from the start, we were trying to push the boundaries of our understandings about learning and learning together, and how do you build a learning community? And immediately that raised questions of diversity and social justice. You know, how do we act in ways that are just with each other? How do we create equity? How do we develop a community where voices are heard? So even though we may not have used the contemporary language of today around inclusion or diversity, that's where we were as a community. Those were our aspirations from the very beginning. And our vision is to continue to do that. And how do we live into it? How do we continue to be creative and innovative around our mission, around the things that we know that we do very well? How do we be truly global? I think many of us on this call who have had experience working in global environments would say, Fielding does that somewhat, but not always. And how do we actually become a more global and a more globally sort of a more culturally competent community in that regard. And then of course for us it's about continuing our educational mission. It's about developing scholars and practitioners and leaders, all in pursuit of a more just and sustainable world. Well, why else are we in education? We're in it for the individual, how benefits accrue to us as individuals in terms of our career, but also we're individuals who really have a care about society and we want to make a positive social difference. So you go to the next slide. I think the starting point of the Inclusion Council is absolutely right in terms of fielding. And then the notion is, so where do we go in terms of how do we think about using the drivers in the institution to help us really build the case for diversity, equity, and inclusion? You might say to yourself, do we really need to build a case? Well, we do. And the reason is you always need to remind yourself of how you're going to get from your high ideal around something and how do you get to the actions that align with that ideal. Otherwise, you're just always talking in the abstract realm. So you really need to be able to say, not only this is the logic, the reasoning for what we're trying to do here, but here's the outcomes and the activities as a result of that. So it's really about, in a sense, studying ourselves, being the best scholar practitioners that we can be for ourselves. So one of the things that the team looked at is, so if we focus on the people, of course, because people are what makes everything happen, at least right now until the machines take over, and communities. How do we use our understanding of our own talents and resources to help us really build into our communities? So if you can, I'm not sure you can do this, Hillary, but on my screen, I think I'm missing just the very last line of this slide. But I believe that what we're talking about here is the 3 categories. So academic excellence, institutional priorities, and social justice. I think that's the bottom of that slide. So Hillary, could you go to the next slide? So the case for academic excellence. So what we've done here is we said, so let's look at the strategic plan and let's look at the linkages. So the things that we've already committed to doing as a community, right? And these are the items that our leaders are currently accountable for and are currently working towards. So we have 2 goals in the strategic plan out of 6. So goal 1 is leading student-centered graduate education. So here we're talking about the student experience. And goal 3, which is linked, is advancing academic excellent innovation. And that goal we're looking at programmatic, right? Academic programs. So there's slightly different foci in terms of the end user, so to speak, student and program, but they're obviously linked very closely together. So goal 1 is, the goal leader is our Dean for Student Development, who some of you have met, and she's new to fielding, and her name is Dang Charawanawong. And in goal 3, our leader, who many of you know, is Steve Shapiro, our Dean for Academic Affairs and formerly faculty in the HOD program. And their accountabilities are, how do we take this objective, making sure that students experience a more inclusive and diverse environment, and make that real? What does that look like? Is that in the curriculum? Yes. Is that in the community work itself? Yes. Is that in the way that we think about scholarship more broadly? Yes. How do we strengthen support systems to enhance student success? That also is, how do we take into consideration all the various learning styles that our student population brings to their learning, and how do we strengthen support systems? That's been articulated in terms of a writing center, which is something students have asked for many years, and also on the books but not yet created is a professional development center, which we want to be able to offer not just to students but also to alumni, so that there's a way to plug in to fielding over a person's life course that that helps them along the way, right, with various choices and ways of thinking about their skill sets and so on. And in goal 3, the 3 areas are the culture of assessment. So for those of you in university environments, that's a term of art in our industry, which is, how do we understand ourselves and what we're doing? How do we measure it? And then how do we feed back what we learn back into what we're doing? I mean, that's sort of the very simplistic but accurate way of describing what assessment is. And when you think about assessment, you have to think about, well, we want to assess ourselves on the values that we hold, on inclusivity, on diversity in this case, also on our other values about learner-centered education and about building community. Same with and so program evaluation is just one piece of that. Investing in faculty development. We set aside money in the budget, and we've increased that funding for professional development for faculty. And it's to what end, right? It's to improve the student learning environment. It's to keep the faculty engaged and up to date and thinking about the latest in their own fields. And we think that's a very important investment. And obviously it has implications for talent and for being able to deliver our programs well. And then the new programs. So we have new programs in clinical mental health counseling and also in couples and family therapy, and they're coming online this fall. And they have concentrations in very specific areas for traditionally underserved populations or on topics that are traditionally either ill understood or just not well understood by clinicians. So we have concentrations in the couples and family therapy, in African American families, in LGBTQ families, and medical service families, and those are families who have to deal with chronic mental illness, and also in Latinx families, and similar concentrations for the counseling and mental health. So again, we're saying to ourselves, we need to make more visible the values that we hold in the communities that we want to serve. So you go to the next slide. So this, I think, I really like this slide a lot. And I mean, I think this is a wonderful presentation. I'm so grateful to the people who wrote it, because I feel like I can really dive into it and really own it. But I think some of the things here too, especially in the first part, is you think about diversity and what being able to be, what being good at navigating diverse environments helps people do. And I think that these first three items are very important. The cognitive complexity, that's exactly what we talk about, and particularly in doctoral level learning, but certainly in graduate education more generally, is stimulating our ability to think about complex situations in complex ways, right? Questioning of one's own perspectives, questioning one's assumptions. This is what you really are aiming for as faculty when you're working through your program all the way to your thesis or dissertation, is you're really wanting to build those skills. You want to make it like a muscle, right? A strong muscle. Developing the ability to see from other perspectives and active engagement. These are all what you say is the full actualization of self and the use of self as an instrument. For us to be our very best and for us to make maximum contribution to society, we need to always be thinking about these things. We need to be building all of our skills in these ways. This together cultivates things like empathy, like the ability to make decisions with imperfect information and quickly. It also cultivates analytical frameworks. So this is I think it's a very important point that there's a connection. It's not just sort of a nice to have value. It's a real connection to what we're aiming for in terms of our academic excellence. And frankly, for me, it sets Fielding apart from other institutions that may do some of this, but not all of it, and not as an explicit way. We can go to the next slide, because you can all read. Another part of academic excellence is really looking at, and this is a really interesting piece, is looking at how we can take advantage of and leverage our strength with multi and interdisciplinarity. And I think this is really interesting, because the comment here is that when you have either departments that can be siloed, or disciplinary cultures might also marginalize the other, right? Because if you're disciplined, then there's non-discipline, right? And it may not even be, like many things, not even particularly intentional. And I think one of the things the faculty worked on in these past couple of years is a common doctoral framework. And that framework is enabling students to be able to cross those disciplinary boundaries more easily. And I hadn't thought of it before until I saw this slide that's actually a mechanism for broadening participation, for broadening multidisciplinarity and engagement with that. And that then allows you to take understandings and say literature that you know from one area and apply it in another and connect them together. Again, it's enhancing one's cognitive complexity. It's enhancing one's perspective. It's creating more rigor in the environment. And you know, fielding has done a lot of good in this way. In fact, in our reaffirmation visit, our recent site visit with our regional creditor, it's nicknamed WASC, one of our commendations for the faculty was the academic rigor of our programs. And I think so this is something that others see in us as well. So you can go to the next slide. So in the second part of this rationale, so I said there are three: the academic excellence, institutional operations, and social justice. In institutional operations, this is about health, right? It's about financial health, and how do we think about the connection between having and building an inclusive community with our financial health. And I think all of these three, you know, increasing our revenue, increasing our financial resources from philanthropy, certainly as the chief fundraiser for the institution, my ability to be able to go out and talk about the heart of fielding is what attracts resources to fielding. The one in the middle about enhancing fielding's reputation, you know, the more we can show our beautiful, strong community to others, the more that we will attract others, other students, other faculty, attract alumni back. You know, the more we can not only show it, but also offer things to people, professional development, seminars, all those things that just opportunities to connect and have good, strong, energetic, intellectual conversations, which we all know when you're out there in the work world, you don't get nearly enough, right? Not enough fieldings in the world. If you go to the next slide, or not enough places where you get these kinds of conversations, I should say. One of the comments that the team is sort of working on, so this is something that, you know, we'd love to have input on, is whether, as I said in the previous comment about attracting people, that when you shine your light, you tend to attract people who want to have those conversations. So one of the ideas here embedded, which I think makes a lot of sense, is that as we look at our plan and we look at our, we have an inclusion plan here noted as the diversity plan, and it's hooked to the overall strategic plan, which is in our umbrella, is to always be mindful about how our own stakeholders can be engaged, right? Not just be engaged, but be engaged in high value and meaningful conversations and input. And then the last comment I make, because I already made the comment about fundraising, but also in this area, and this is speculative, is thinking about what kinds of things could we do that could be programs or certificates or offerings, might even be a little revenue generating, that focus on diversity and inclusion. One item came up yesterday on my email. A group was talking about, well, maybe we could offer continuing education units in cultural humility training, or in some aspect of a part of a curriculum that we already have, but we haven't pulled it out and shared it in a more, say, bite-sized form, so that we could attract more diverse audience. Maybe not everyone is ready for or interested in doctoral education, but we could still offer things that were congruent and aligned with our own expertise that would speak to diversity and inclusion. You can go to the next slide. So the third sort of angle that the team is working on is the case for social justice. So, you know, we've talked about goal 3, about culture of assessment, you know, that's one of the reasons you would think of that as a social justice issue is it's really important that students know what is expected of them and what we expect of ourselves and how we're measuring that and feeding that back in, right? That's about openness, honesty, it being explicit about what we're trying to accomplish. I think it's important when you think about employee engagement. We're in a hiring spree right now because we've got new programs coming online and new positions, and several candidates shared with me that when we asked them the why fielding question, they say because it's so clear on your website, it's so clear the people I talk to what you care about, and you care about social justice, you care about diversity, you care about community, you care about learner-centered education, you have a passion for your mission. And so obviously we are inspiring others, and that's important too, because you can inspire others to act in meaningful ways. And then the fifth part is, of course, our alumni. You know, how do we make it real for our alumni? So when they come back, and we're getting record numbers of graduates coming to our events, to our seminars and such all year long now. And one of the things that we're noticing is what you, if some of you are alumni, what you really like is meaningful conversations. It's not that hard to figure out, because you tell us, and how important that is for your sense of energy and engagement in the world. You go to the next slide. So this is really important, that we want to be the home for scholars and practitioners, for leaders who are motivated by social justice initiatives and vision. We want to build advocates. We want to be a place where you can access other people of like mind and other people of difference. So it's not just that we're all singing from the same sheet of music. We're a dialogic community. We ought to have lots and vigorous debate. That's what we are. We hold a big container. We want to be a scholar practitioner model of learning that's very expansive in our thinking. And these are important ideas that are really very close to the hearth and home that's Fielding. You can go to the next slide. So here's some things that are going on right now at Fielding. So we've been building our capacity. So we've been looking at operations, adding resources, trying to build more lines of engagement in all of our face-to-face sessions. So in our national sessions as well as our regional. We have action learning groups to collaborate, to do work together on curriculum and research. There's a social transformation grant opportunity for faculty who will work with alumni and students in various grants. And we're doing more training and dialogues. So that's for staff as well as for faculty and students and alumni. So these are the things that we're aiming for. Mid-year, probably sometime around or early next year in January, we'll be hiring a Chief Diversity Officer. So I think that's very important. And we'll continue to integrate the work into the life and operations and activities of the institution. So I don't know if there's any more slides. Any more? There is. So here's some things we've been doing as well. We've built out the infrastructure. So if you didn't know before, we have an inclusion council, and we have a building inclusive collaborative that has strategic advisors, an action learning team, an implementation team, as well as the council. So we have, I think, something like 54 people, most of them alumni, engaged in this work, but there are also faculty, staff, and students involved. We have a climate assessment that's just coming. We're just getting the results of which we asked diversity and inclusion questions. So that'll give us a good baseline for knowing we'll have an awful lot in that data that will help us build out our activities for the coming years. We do a climate assessment every 2 years at Fielding, but that's staff and faculty, so that's not a student assessment. We're talking about how we can do a student. We have a student survey, but it doesn't always, and it also has some data related to diversity and inclusion. So but doesn't always ask exactly the questions we'd like, because it's a national instrument, but we're working on making that more tailored to what we want to know, but same thing. We're working on some of the tasks. We had a task force on LGBTQ, and also we have a sustainability working group, which is a organic volunteer group, and there's always ideas and items that come up from those groups. The Social Transformation Project is the grants that I mentioned before, and we're wanting to do more sharing across programs about what those activities are, what they do, and how to get involved. We're doing more things around the intergroup dialogue. So if you were at winter session, you saw that. You saw those opportunities. Recognizing the Heritage Months is something that the team's helping me do as president. Having more smaller locally oriented or regionally oriented convenings so that people can get to them more easily, and then more faculty development, which the faculty are wanting to engage in this work as well. And as you know, sometimes people just need the tools to do what they know they want to do, but maybe aren't sure how to do. You go to the next slide. So that was the last slide. So that's all I wanted to say about this, but I would also like to invite the voices of the other panelists like June and Akasha, and I think I'd start with you, Akasha. If there's anything you'd like to add, and of course, if there's anything that I've either misrepresented or missed, like a big gap, you should tell me what that is too, so we can be sure to keep improving and gathering the input that we'd like to have as a community. So Akasha.
Yes, thank you, Katrina. I think it was exceptional, and hello, everyone. And I really want to start off by echoing, what you said about the alumni making up a large percentage of the collaborative effort, both in terms of participation as members and supporting the work, being actively involved in the work. I mean, we cannot quantify the contribution that they've made. I don't think anyone, including Phelan, will be able to pay the alumni as a group in terms of how much this group within the community have contributed to building inclusion at Phelan. So thank you. There are just a few other things that I wanted to highlight. So you mentioned some of the things that we're involved in, or things that are upcoming for the collaborative. And an exciting thing is a big fellowship, which is also targeting alumni. And the opportunity with the big fellowship is for folks who are out in the world doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work to bring some of that into Fielding, so that we are continuously building Fielding's effort around inclusion. So it will be an opportunity there are already projects in place. So the fellows will get an opportunity to support those projects as well. For example, I see Christopher Hicks on the call. I know that he's working on his dissertation, although at a different institution. Chris, we should talk about that. But he's working on a dissertation on best practices around chief diversity officers. And you mentioned, Katrina, that we'll be hiring a CDO early next year at some point in 2019. So one of the potential projects within the big fellowship is that folks can bring that work, their best practices around CDO. Chris might, example, be a person, like a point person who facilitates some of that research and facilitates some of the activities involved in best practices around chief diversity officers. So that opportunity, Big Fellows will also support with summer session activities, like you mentioned, some of the regional activities that we'll be doing throughout the year. So lots of opportunities, and then we'll be sending out some call for application and more detailed description of what the fellowship is. The other thing I would like to mention, so I'm so grateful you mentioned the STP projects, the social transformation projects, and the intention that we have for folks who are out in the community doing work, bringing their scholar practitioner work into the community, but a way to also bring some of those learnings back into Fielding. So we'll be having a STP colloquium at summer session, and it's going to be on the Tuesday of summer session from 9 to 12:30 p.m. So it should be on the schedule for those who will be at summer session. Feel free to join. It will be an opportunity, just as you said, Katrina, an opportunity for those who have, for the grantees who have been implementing their projects to share some of their learning with the rest of the Fielding community. So it's going to be quite exciting. And then our intergroup dialogue sessions, again, most of which will be on Tuesday. So really inviting folks to come out to that, to participate, to dialogue with us as we learn together and build a more inclusive Fielding together. So those are the only things I would add.
Thank you, Akasha. And Hillary, I'm sure would be happy to send that wonderful flyer that was designed for that. We'll make sure it goes out to the participants here.
Yes, thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, Akasha. Great. And thanks for mentioning the Fellows program, because we're going to launch that soon. And
yeah, that's right.
Looking forward to that. June, do you have any comments?
You're on mute, June. And while you're unmuting yourself, Tom, I see that you're here. So
okay, hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, June.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, while we have alumni on the call today, that we have future alumni, the millennials, coming into our midst. And thank you for the research on how this generation of young people really appreciates inclusive behavior and being socially responsible. They may be one of the most giving generous generations ever. And I think graduating from Fielding, for me anyway, was not really graduating. It was becoming part of a larger community of people who feel and think and behave in a particular way. And I think the alumni becomes that fabric that keeps your mission, vision, and values alive in the world. And as we bring more people in who, through our admissions process, feel like that's what they want, then we're going to have that happen over and over and over again. And I think that's really exciting for the world to become a better place. So thank you for including me.
Thanks, June. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time after a meeting to find a spot to be part of this work. And also, you know, we're always asking about good data. And I also appreciate your point about millennial, because, you know, one of the things I say is we were invented in the mid-70s, and people who were 40 in 1974, our average age, were born in 1934. So the person who's 40 now and coming to Fielding is very different from our original student. And it's not, and generational is one way to describe cohorts. Of course, that's always in very, very general terms, but we are seeing differences in what students not only expect and hope for in a doctoral program and graduate level work, but also what they need, which may be slightly different now. And they should be, because society is different. And so I think that that's another important aspect of the work. There's a deeper epistemology, really, that is shifting in society in the 21st century. And I think it's really worth being with other people to investigate that a little more. I know that there are other people on the call I can see. I can't see everyone unless you've written something in the chat, but I know like Leslie's here and Ruth's here, and
yeah, Tom is now here.
Tom is now here. Oh, there's Tom. Tom, you were one of the people who put together this wonderful PowerPoint that I've been using all over the institution. Is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. And good afternoon, everyone. And I really also have to acknowledge certainly June, who was also in our team, and also Karen Williams, who was also on our team in developing this explicit rationale. So folks, I think that for most of you, you're aware, and those of you who are not, this is your golden opportunity to find out just a tad more about institutional priorities. And it starts with the letter E, which is enrollment. And that really is also the lifeblood of operations. And that really does drive a lot of our work in terms of our scholarship and our practice and everything else that goes under the sun here. So how does inclusion, how does diversity really help with enrollment? It really has a lot to do with it, because it really enhances our organizational branding. It offers up opportunities for folks to engage in the actual sort of the lived experiences of our students and faculty members and the like, and bringing everyone together through programs. So one of the things I like to share is something that we've been doing more consistently in the last, I would say maybe 2 to 3 months, that you may have seen this year, which is to do with a concerted effort led by Katrina on acknowledging certain heritage months, certain history months and the like on a monthly basis. I think we've done that. We've always done that, but we, I think, try to take a more of a formal and consistent approach. And so it actually has a name for this monthly message that goes out. Called Inclusion Spotlight. And that's going to be a branded, regularly published sort of piece that includes the president's message, but also various highlights of students' dissertation, faculty's research areas, and the like. So very excited about that. And as part of this monthly inclusive sort of programming, we're also looking at having a Zoom panel on a particular topic, and we're even thinking about maybe including or offering continuing education units, not only to draw folks through a very tangible value, but also to draw additional audiences in the broader field, speaking of fielding. And so we're really living the inclusion, and we're also linking very strategically these activities to furthering the strategy of the institution. So a lot of times people get a little concerned about diversity inclusion initiatives, thinking that maybe it's a little bit more of a busy work for everyone, but I think we're really taking a targeted approach, and we're really moving the needle. And we want to monitor how well we're doing in areas like enrollment and in areas like satisfaction by students and also faculty members and staff, and the climate survey and the like. And so there's a lot more that we'll probably be sharing, but this is just really the foundational work. And I just want to thank you all for your interest and attention, and we'll be leaning to you all for engagement as well.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate those call outs too, very specific around that messaging. And then also the invitation. I think many hands make light work, and we have a lot of work, but it's joyful work. And I think who wouldn't be feeling blessed to be doing this? And frankly, it is all a piece. The tapestry is only as strong as the weakest thread. So we need to be strong in our values, and because that's what we have to hold on to in this world. And I think that's what we said we want. So this is the community we need to create. So I think Hillary's trying to get Karen online. I think, not sure what's happening. But while we're waiting, is there anyone who would like to type in a question?
I think that Karen might have access. Karen, you want to go ahead and try?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Woohoo! Okay, I did have just a few things that I wanted to throw in, just to kind of focus about why we even did this explicit rationale, as we're calling it. First of all, is a way to clarify that, kind of as Tom was referring to just as he was wrapping up there, that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are not just some kind of side thing. They're actually key to the success of the institution in at least those three ways. And those three ways, it seems, to me are just anchors to an institution like Fielding. We need academic excellence. We need institutional operations to do well. And because it's part of Fielding's mission, we need social justice to work well. So DEI is just central to that whole effort. And those three pieces are actually very interconnected, that each one feeds into the other, so that academic excellence, for example, helps institutional operations to do better because it attracts more quality faculty and more quality students and more money, for example. And so likewise with social justice. And then the third thing that I wanted to say, so we often just talk about diversity, but as we see through this explicit rationale, diversity alone is not enough, because, for example, with the academic excellence improvements, that requires not just having a diverse collection of people, it requires them to have high quality interactions with each other, because that's how we develop the cognitive complexity and so on. And so we can't just say diversity is going to be enough. We need inclusion. We need equity so that voices, people feel their voices can be offered into the space and that others are listening. So I just wanted to speak to that, to the interconnection between all these pieces and how key they are to fielding success. That's it.
Thank you, Karen. I think those are very thoughtful remarks as well. I think what that sparked for me too is how do we keep expanding the circle? And I think one of the ways we're expanding the circle is not only, yes, offering this kind of communication where people can sit and listen and process and think, but also having a lot to offer, right? So that people can engage in ways that where they want to, like they could say, well, that doesn't interest me, but that does, you know, that we offer enough robustness that we can engage people's hearts and minds in different ways as is appropriate for them at the moment of their learning. And I think that's very exciting because to me, that is very congruent with why I came to fielding in the faculty, which is because I was so attracted to the learning model and what the students and faculty were doing together. And that remains true. And to me, this is just an extension of that work.
Absolutely.
Are there any other comments, thoughts, advice, things we could do better, things you'd like to see that you don't see? I mean, I'm always very aware with our students and graduates is how much expertise you bring to the table. And I thank you, Kasha, for calling that out too, that there are people on this webinar right now who are steeped in much of this work and have a lot of expertise and guidance to offer. And I do hope that you'll, as you think about what fielding's doing, feel free to reach out, if not in this forum, but even one-on-one or council member, or send a note to my office and we'll figure out the right way, you know, who to answer it and how. And because we really want people to feel like we're accessible and open to different framing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really want to echo that, Katrina, because, you know, Plácida Gallegos, the chair of the Inclusion Council, and BIC really is intent on having this experience be collaborative. You know, so bringing in folks who really want to give back. Leslie said this before, I think she left, you know, the webinar, saying that this, as an alum, has been a meaningful experience for her. You know, and I've been thinking about that recently, how this collaborative is maybe it wasn't intentionally set up this way, but it has given alums an opportunity to be to re-engage themselves in the field and community, and that's really exciting. And to that, I also want to acknowledge you, Hillary. You know, you've been really active and bringing alums in, making sure that we're sharing updates with them, and really sort of deepening that connection between the collaborative and the alumni network. So thanks for that, and let's keep it going, please.
And I had actually, in the last couple of minutes here, thank you for your kind words. I wanted to ask if you can share a little bit more about what you'll be doing at summer session and some of the outcomes that you're hoping to find, or at least maybe some new questions or new ideas that you think you might be garnering from the conversations that we'll have at summer session. Yeah,
you know, it connects to something Karen said earlier about it's not just diversity that matters, and it's also not just talking about inclusion and diversity and equity. You know, at summer session, particularly with the intergroup dialogue sessions, we're really wanting to do a few things, really to certainly have the conversations and have the conversations about differences, whether it's intergenerational, whether it's racial, whether it's sexual orientation differences, you know, but really to have real conversation. Because one of the things that I know that we're equipped to do at Fielding is to have difficult conversations, but I don't think we have enough of them. So part of the setup at summer session is to create a space where we can learn and grow together from having these difficult dialogues. And so a walk away from that is really having people leave summer session feeling even more a part of the fielding community, feeling like this is really a space where I belong, whether I'm a current student or an alum, a board member, a faculty member. We really want people to have that experience. That's a part of the reason for the Inclusion Council, to have people feel included, and certainly to learn something. So we're quite aware that there are some of us who could benefit from some cultural humility training, some deeper cultural understanding, just in terms of our differerences, how we interact with each other, student to student, faculty to student, faculty to staff, and so many other connections in between. So we're intent on having folks leave summer session being a little bit more aware of themselves and a little bit more aware of the other. I think that's a way that fielding will grow and become even much more attractive to future students, as Tom was alluding to. This is also about keeping fielding around. I have said a few times, I would like my son to have fielding as an option for him to attend if and when he's ready for higher ed, and that means really fielding being an attractive place for future students. So I would say those are like two key expectations, hopes, intentions that we have for summer session.
Thank you so much. I look forward to being a part of that session. Thank you for putting this together. We really appreciate it.